Welcome back to Natural 2, our D&D and tabletop role-playing game podcast and talk show. I am Nathan, my co-host as always is James, and today we are doing something that I have enjoyed doing since I was a wee lad, and that is pestering people with would you rather questions. Anybody who has known me for any period of time has heard one of my random would you rathers, and now we're making an entire segment out of it. So I will pose my first one to James and we'll go from there. So, James, I guess the little thing that we should put forward is all things are equal outside of the scope of the question. So if anything comes up of like what specifics might be involved, just assume they're equal across the board. But anyway, would you rather have a mediocre DM but an incredible group of players in your group, or have an incredible DM but surrounded by mediocre players, you being the player in this scenario?
So, I think this is a good one right
I
off the
like
bat.
this one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is a banger. Mm,
And I guess it's up to your interpretation what mediocre and exceptional means, but I'm sure you can envision it. Like we're talking like top tier, like I guess you could use Matthew Mercer as an example, but around that of like the best DM you could possibly imagine, and then whatever you imagine for your best player group to surround you with.
it's been a while since I really sat and watched them, but how bad is it that I feel like they actually embody the first the first choice of this
Mhm.
question? Um, so think I think that I'm gonna lean toward having an incredible DM.
Okay.
Um, and my reasoning behind that is that um, the DM is the center of the universe, or just is the universe. And so, if all the game is playing in this incredible world with um, the rest of the party being made up of people who don't really know the rules or don't know their characters or don't engage at the same level, I can deal with that. Um, if they are playing like they are glorified sidekicks, then that's all right.
Mhm.
You know, uh, I've been in that situation before. Um, not in this group. So if anybody
Mhm.
from our group watches this and they damn well better, then I don't mean this group, but
Mhm.
um, also I'm pretty well comfortable with duets or one-on-one. So I think there's a world in which I could play a lot of D&D and be just fine. Just me and my magical pocket DM.
Mhm. I expected that would be your answer, and I'm kind of glad because my answer is the opposite, and I'm curious if you might see it differently. The uh the way that I kind of conceptualized it is really sitting there thinking about it, and we've already brought up before we started recording that like my experience as a player is a little bit flimsy, so a lot of this is from the DM's perspective, which might skew my answer. But anyway, when I picture a good D&D session, like one that you walk away from and you're like, "Oh, that just felt so good." And you're like, you feel amped and you're thinking about it as like the hours past the session tick by. It all comes down to energy, usually in my experience. Like how involved was everybody, how excited was everyone, how like bought in was the entirety of the group, and this is including the DM. And more often than not, as much as I would subscribe to the DM being in charge of a lot of the game and its aspects, I think the energy of the game is usually dictated by the group more often than not. Because if you can't get the group involved, or if you can't get the group to even like kind of get off the foundation and do anything, it's difficult to tell a compelling story or to do anything interesting. Where I think in the alternative situation, where you have a DM that maybe isn't as prepared or can't think as quick on his feet and is stumbling through stuff, but the party is just excited to be there and continue to add things, I think that's a better alternative because it's easier to jive with that group and your peers in the situation than to rely on this one person to carry the weight that is kind of being dropped on them. So I would opt for having a more exceptional player base around me than a more exceptional DM would be where I land.
I it to be clear, it's also a matter of degrees for
Hmm.
me. Like there's not a clear.
Oh yeah, you can't like play D&D with a DM who's like a fish. Like you have to have like some level of competency.
Yeah, but there's not an obvious answer for me. And if you
Hmm.
ask me in a week, then I
Hmm.
might be leaning the other way on that one. But
I thought it was
that's a good.
interesting to think about, yeah, nonetheless. So.
My first one is unintentionally like a mirror of this question. Would you, as a DM, rather have a player who is super conscientious, always takes notes, is always on time, is never absent without uh a good reason. So their sort of administrative side is absolutely on point,
Hmm.
but in terms of the actual in playing the actual game and playing the actual campaign, they're just very kind of passive and just waiting for you to
Hmm.
show them, what they're supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
Or the inverse. A player that's passionate and that is engaged, but is also pretty flaky.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you want the perfect mix of both. Because the game that I usually enjoy or try to craft is more like story centric and very dramatic and very like the narrative is a lot more the focus than like the nitty gritty details of mechanics and combat and damage and that kind of thing. I would have to say that I prefer the player that's more flaky but more engaged when we sit down and actually play versus being very like put together and objectively prepared, but then doesn't input a lot during the game. I found that somewhat frustrating in the past, where like someone spends all week preparing something, and then when it comes time to actually do it, it's like trying to interact with a brick wall. Um, but there is the absolute devastation of like preparing something all week and not hearing from someone, and then I'm not showing up that day, and it's like, mm. So it's both sides have very big cons. But I think for the long term, I would much rather have someone who's excited to kind of get in there and really like get involved versus being more objectively prepared. Yeah, I think that's where I would land.
Uh, I don't have a real I don't have a rebuttal. I think that's probably where I would go
Hmm. I think if we
to.
did run like a war game or something like that, I would much prefer having the more like administrative player because that's really
Or
useful in that kind of setting.
more
Because
straight up dungeon crawl.
yeah, you could even refer to them to be like, "Oh, I didn't get like keep good notes here. Could you remind me of this or that?" And that is super useful. But yeah, I think for our style of game or that, the game that we look for more often than not, someone who's a bit more in there is preferred. So, okay. So my second one's a little weird.
Bring on the weirdness.
And
I'm ready.
you might have to ask questions after it, but that's totally fine. If you had to play a character that was
Questions like,
either
"Are you okay?"
um, you have to play a character who is either entirely mute or entirely deaf, with no way of like restoring this down the road.
Hmm.
Or I guess character, I might have said player, but anyway.
We all, yeah,
Yeah.
we all know that distinction by now. Um, so I feel like it would be almost impossible to uh, avoid metagaming playing a deaf character as a hearing person.
Hmm.
Uh, and I also feel like the penalties to your perception for being a deaf character would be very annoying in the long haul.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna go with mute. I think that also opens up some really interesting opportunities for alternative methods of communication.
Hmm.
I would have to decide how much I was going to commit. Like, if I'm speaking, even if I'm just taking action as my character,
Hmm.
I would probably avoid speaking at all. It would be really easy. Not like obviously I would talk in the course of the game because that would get really old otherwise. But I would want to try to minimize the amount of time spent doing things like my character makes this motion at you and my character uh you know stares at you as if to say dot dot dot
Well, I
and
think
really just try to be like miming it out.
that would be the interesting part of playing a mute character is finding the different way of communicating without actually speaking, right? And so you could get into descriptions of like what your character's face looks like or what his body language looks like, and then even have the party interpret that, and you could even leave it somewhat gray. And this is kind of something that could get out of hand and maybe a little bit obnoxious at some point. But I do think mute is probably more preferable than deaf, even though deaf could be interesting. There's a whole other myriad of different challenges that you could overcome in creative ways. But I like the idea of like thinking about what a long-term deaf character looks like and how much like you would have to listen to the party sit there and have this deep conversation. Then you're just
Right. It would be, I think it would be a lot more isolating from the rest of the group
Mhm.
than being mute.
Yeah, I think you
Also, the
could
mute
hand
character can still write things down.
Yeah, you could hand wave it as like, oh, we all learn sign language, and every time we speak, we're doing sign language. Like that could probably be implemented and kind of skirt around this problem, but then it kind of ruins the whole point.
If at least one person in the party took signing as one of their languages at
Mm,
character creation, then that would be a workaround.
mm.
But like you said, that now it's just
Yeah, no, it's nothing.
every conversation just becomes like, oh, I tell them that.
Yeah, there is no official sign language in D&D, right? It's like a language.
Not that I've ever come across.
Huh. I'm sure there's some like third-party material thing for it. So,
It's not about yeah, well, and
mhm.
there's nothing really to create. You just
Yeah,
give it a
yeah,
name and say, well,
yeah,
there it is.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, I thought
but
that was a little fun one. So,
yeah, interesting. So my next one for you. Would you rather be the secret creative director of D&D, where you can write them an email and say this part kind of sucks, rework this, or take things in that direction.
hmm.
So you are at the rudder and nobody even necessarily knows. Or play other systems and be able to reliably find people who would be interested to play them, but you can never play D&D again.
So the purpose of the would you rather is either I kind of have a lot more creative control over D&D, but it is the sole system that I can play, or I have no control over D&D and I can just play any other system. Is kind of boiling it
It's
down.
it's more like um I wouldn't even say that you can't play other systems with the
Hmm.
first option. It's just
You have
you
a
can
lot of
be
control over the big one.
yeah, you could be the secret creative director of D&D, or you can play all any and all other
Mhm.
systems and and have a group. Like
Yeah.
you're guaranteed a group for them. That's an important distinction, I feel.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're guaranteed a group in whatever other systems, but you cannot play D&D again. Men will come to your house and tase you if you try.
That's actually, yeah, I'm kind of split on it. There, like the altruistic side of me would love to be the secret creative director of D&D because then I feel like I can at least help point it in the right direction as far as what right means as far as a community goes. But there are so many other cool systems that I've stumbled across that I would love to try, but there's either just not enough people or the time or the energy to do. So having like a guaranteed group to do that with would be cool. I think if I could recontextualize the second option into like my main group is willing to play every and all system at any point, I'd probably go with that. Like I'm not a big fan of like hopping from one group to the next, so as long as it stays consistent, I think that's good. Uh, I think that would be my answer, but it's a pretty even split. I could live with both, but I think I would lean gently towards playing other systems because there's a lot out there that I would like to try.
Hmm. I don't like things that are always or never
Hmm.
as a kind of as a rule, and it leads to some decision making paralysis in my actual life. But so I think I would be the secret creative director of
Yeah,
D&D.
I had a feeling that'd be where you lean, but I think that's a totally like valid choice. That would be so interesting just to like as a experiment to like grab some random D&D player and make him like the veto be all end all of D&D for a little bit just to see where it goes. Like obviously it'll never happen, but it would be interesting to see.
All right, hit me with your best shot.
Okay, this one's a bit broad, and I don't know where you're gonna land, and it's a little bit of an easy one, but would you rather play in person or play online?
Damn, I was not. You caught me off guard. I was not expecting.
I
Not
wrote that
expecting
one down and I was like, is that worthy to ask? And I was like, yeah, I mean, we've kind of had this conversation a few different times before, so.
so simple that
Mm.
it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, playing online has a lot of advantages.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's there is no commute to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the sky is the limit in terms of like the technology, the resources, or visualization, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would have to give in person the edge. That that being able to, in some ways, it's easier to do things like have background music.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about people's bandwidth, and just the scene, just the physical presence of a D&D game with people, potentially shuffling papers or getting their books out, and the sound of dice, and everybody sort of leaning over an important roll to see what number comes up. I think there is a je ne sais quoi about an in-person live game,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is kind of special.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could, now, this is, I'm assuming a certain level of like idealism, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather play online than play in a damp alley in person.
Uh,
But there again, like you were saying, all things being equal, um, probably in person. Yeah.
no. I think like the real thing that goes back and forth because I'm pretty split on it. The pros of online is you are entirely in control of your space and your environment and your beginning and end. Like you're at your desk at your setup with your notes and your stuff. Like you can go do whatever you need to do, and once the session's done, the session's done. Whereas like in person, there's almost the con of like, especially if you're the one hosting, which usually the DM is the one who hosts, and I am the forever DM. It's like, I can't just like kick people out, and I have to like worry about sitting there and doing small talk and shooting the shit and kind of waiting around and cleaning things up, and like that is really the only downside. Is I very much enjoy my own space, my own time, and my own like routine, and so having to bow down to other people for that short period of time would be obnoxious, but I think overall it would be something worth it to enjoy the in-person game. Like we've only ever had our one long in-person session, uh, but there's something to be said about the attention that you can get in an in-person game versus an online game. Like even with everybody trying their best to like get rid of distractions or to try and be as focused as possible, you can't imitate like being able to look someone in the eye or like shake their hand or like excitedly like express to them like being present with someone you can't replicate with webcams even though it gets pretty damn close. So yeah, I think overall probably in person, but it's not as cut and dry as I think most people expect their answer to be initially once you actually start really breaking it down.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack,
Mhm.
especially with the pandemic years,
Hmm.
sort of in the rearview mirror at last.
Well, there's a lot of posts I've seen of like, oh, we went online for the pandemic and now we just decided to stay online because it's easier.
Yeah, and it is,
Mm-hmm.
especially like you want to talk about uh all that stereotypical busy adult nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Online solves some of that
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Um, so and again, this is another one where it's like it's close. It's I wouldn't say that it's one is just miles better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just about like being a D&D sommelier and just this one's just got a little more body. Um,
Anyway, what's your next one, sir?
I want to lighten it up a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
was expecting some goofy stuff, and we've kept it pretty real here today.
Well, my last one's goofy, so.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, would you rather have a dragon's treasure hoard in real life, but you have to defend it from adventurers, or be a race of your choosing or an ancestry of your choosing from the game, or let's say D&D to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but you must agree to uh regular appointments to be studied by researchers for basically the rest of your life.
Uh, um, I mean, the Dragon Horde thing I think is interesting and also somewhat funny because you probably could prevent most adventurers from getting to you just by like placing 100 doors in the way and just letting them kill themselves on doors. Um, I, it would be interesting to be like a fucking dragonborn in our real world, but it'd probably get really obnoxious, like going to the grocery store and every time you're like grabbing a box of cereal, like everyone's looking at you and everyone knows who you are. Uh, I don't know if there's a lot of traits, like racial traits, that I would really be excited about in D&D traditionally. Like, there's like dark vision and breathing fire and living long, I guess. There are a few races that I think have like telekinesis or something of the sort. Um,
Or
that
you be a freaking bird man and just fly.
that is true. Yeah, there are flying races, and I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of races, and I probably don't know them off the top of my head, but there's even like the like angelic races and whatnot and shit. So, because money's just money. Like a dragon horde is just money.
Money is a superpower. I'll have you know.
I think I'd have to go with being a race. I'd have to do a lot more research to figure out which one I prefer. Um, but I think I'd have more fun with that. I would like you could also spin a career out of that. Imagine being like the only dragonborn comedian or motivational speaker. Like that sells itself right there. Like, um,
I like
yeah.
that. That's where your mind goes. Dragonborn stand-up comic. Something that has nothing to do with the advantages of being Dragonborn. Like it doesn't matter what the racial traits are as a stand-up comic because they're not relevant.
Yeah, but your jokes could be so pointed and they could be puns and it would be great.
Not a Dragonborn welder or a Dragonborn
Well, that's
fireman
boring as
or
shit because then you're just doing what's like easy for you.
Dragonborn stand-up comic.
I gotta make that a thing in our game now. Find some stupid name for him.
So is that just we're not looking for the most well-researched answer here. Just off the top of your head, like would it be Dragonborn? Is that what you would pick?
I think a flying race would be cool. A flying race would be really cool, and that's what like maybe not is it the Aarakocra, I think is what it's called or something.
Or
Uh,
Aarakocra?
yeah, like the bird people. Um, being a dragonborn would be super dope. Like being a dwarf would be cool, but the difference between a fantasy dwarf and a real life dwarf isn't too significant, so I feel like that kind of ruins a lot of the specialty of it. Being an elf would be interesting. Does this also? I guess this also includes like what monster races and whatnot too.
Why not? Yeah.
Hmm. I think it'd be fun to be like a Goliath or an orc or some shit. Like just be the biggest, baddest, weirdest musclehead ever. Like, hmm. I don't know. I'm really attached to Dragonborn though. I've always had a thing for him, and I think they are like just visually so striking. Um, yeah, that'd probably be my answer without having a bunch of research in front of me.
Okay. All right.
What is your answer, sir?
I think I would go with the race as well.
Okay.
For most of the same reasons, like you said, you could make a career out of product placement. A&W root beer, everybody. This episode brought to you by a 2-liter bottle of root beer.
Hey, you gotta stay hydrated.
So, yeah, you could spin a career out of being the only one of your kind,
Hmm.
and the special abilities that you might have innately. So
The only
yeah,
goblin comedian.
you may not have, you may not amount a dragon's horde,
Hmm.
but you're gonna be comfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
You would undoubtedly be a celebrity even if you didn't want to be.
right,
Hmm.
yeah. But if you wanted to be, it would
Yeah.
be easy mode.
Hmm.
So, and I have been researching it in the last 90 seconds, and I would be a Protector Azamar.
Okay.
Uh, so you get a Charisma bonus, a Wisdom bonus, Dark Vision, the Light cantrip, Lay on Hands, basically, uh, and for 1 minute, uh, a day, or 1 minute per long rest, you can sprout frickin' angel wings and fly, and fly. So talk about like you could start a cult,
Hmm.
then you wouldn't have to worry about money.
I would love to see like the limitations of that D&D race like in real life where you only have a minute. And so there's like you can only do certain set pieces every so often or like you only do a show once a day.
That yeah, that would be a 1 minute once a day. That
That's
yeah,
not a lot.
no, when you take it out of the, you know, initiative count,
Hmm.
that's a very limited time.
But it
So make
would
it count.
be, yeah, it'd be awesome to like jump off of like a high cliff or something, free fall the majority of the way, and then save yourself with angel wings at the end.
Yeah.
It also make great entrance for a comedy show.
Just come through the roof. Uh,
Oh, you ready for my
I
last one, sir?
I really like I really like that was where your mind went.
I've always thought it'd be funny to be a comedian, and so just the fact of like having that like free ticket to be like have attention from people,
Are
like
you
that'd be
serious right now? You thought it would be funny
to be a
to be a
comedian.
comedian.
Yeah. Like it's not like I want to be a comedian because there's some like draw within me to like make people laugh. I just think it would be hilarious to be a comedian because you could mess with people so much. And that's what I love doing.
It's your job to like
Hmm.
wait for hecklers to
Yeah,
do their thing
exactly.
and then
Yep.
take them down. Yeah. Okay.
Which would be so easy if you're a dragonborn. You can just be like, man, I'll fucking roast you literally right now.
That'd be like your go-to thing. That would
Yeah.
be your t-shirt.
Yep. Anyway.
All right, let's have it.
So my last would you rather, a TPK has occurred. Would you rather wake up in a prison or wake up naked and left for dead as a party?
This one's easier for me. Naked and Left for Dead.
Okay.
Um, I there's in the first place, like a prison escape becomes I don't know that there's both of these things have kind of been done, right?
Hmm.
But there's something about a prison escape that just feels like okay, let's mingle with the other jerks and figure out who's got the spoon hidden up their butt.
Remind me to never do a prison escape in our game then, Jesus.
What we have to trade for it. There's just a lot of potential for it to get like kind of dreary, kind of boring. You'd have to work
Hmm.
really hard, I think, to keep that from happening.
I think the only pushback I would give you is like, assumedly, in the prison escape scenario, your stuff is somewhere that you can reacquire. But if you're left naked and for dead in the middle of nowhere, who knows who has your stuff and where they went and who they are? Like,
But what a story opportunity, right? Because first
mm-hmm,
of all, the imagery of waking up in the middle of nowhere in a heap, in some open grave,
mm-hmm,
and clawing your way up, and whoever put you there thinks you're dead.
mm-hmm,
So you can plot some really good revenge. Um, you can drop in on NPCs and they'd be like, I thought you were dead. And then you can be all angsty and
mm-hmm.
gritty about it, and maybe I was. Uh,
You may have killed the man, but you haven't
yeah.
killed the soul.
So there's a lot you could do with that I think would be more fun for
Mm-hmm,
me. Um, and hey, you get to it's almost like taking the same character back to the beginning.
mm-hmm,
If you still have your levels, you can find some loot
mm-hmm.
and work your way back, and that process could be fun too.
I think I enjoy them both, but I almost lean towards the prison escape more because as trotted out as that environment is, I do love that scenario because even like envisioning myself as a player in that scenario, I like the idea of being humbled and having to like rein in my expectations again, which I think applies to both scenarios, but it's a lot more like visceral in the prison scenario where like the guards literally hold your life in your hands, so you gotta like bow down to them. The prisoners around you are on the same station as you. There's no like, I'm the hero of XYZ. How dare you speak to me in such a way? Because now you're just Joe Bob in the same cell as Big Al or whoever. So I really like that idea of like having to reset your expectations and work within this new landscape. But I think that does also apply to the Left 4 Dead. But it's just, I think being completely stripped back to like square one, I imagine most players, and even myself to some extent, would feel disheartened by that a little bit. Like, I think it's fun to conceptualize about, but then to actually sit there and play through and like work through, I think would wear on most people. But I don't really know until we try it. But we might include it now. We'll see.
Guess we have to do them both.
Yeah.
Uh,
Back to back.
yeah, we'll do the prison break first. Let's save the best for last.
Mhm.
So my last one for you is a little half baked,
Okay.
but I couldn't. I was having a hard time coming up with like the other.
Mhm.
So so instead of would you rather, it was would you wanna, and that's I don't that we would do a different episode.
Mhm.
But then it just becomes yes no questions, and that's not really a good
Mhm.
game right there. But all right, would you rather that the thing that bothers you most, whatever it is, as a DM, simply no longer bothers you anymore? Not that it is fixed.
It just doesn't bother me.
It just doesn't bother you. So a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist gives you a lobotomy, and now
Mhm.
you just don't care anymore.
Mhm.
Or we add a person to the group who is your platonic ideal in terms of their engagement, their commitment, what have you, but they want to take over as DM.
Hmm. Well, so the first option at like surface level is appealing, but I think ultimately is almost like a negative overall. Because when I'm envisioning this reality in which whatever doesn't bother or whichever bothers me the most now doesn't bother me, that's where I think a lot of my fuel of being able to get better and want to improve comes from is being bothered by these things and wanting to fix them and wanting to solve them and like constantly going after that kind of thing. And so just eliminating the one that bothers me the most would probably almost be problematic in a sense. Um, so I think the alternative just wins based off of the first being almost a straight negative in my mind. And like having someone take over as DM that lines up with me is not the end of the world, I suppose. So yeah, I think that is ultimately my answer, I guess.
Even if it means that you don't DM again ever. Like they are the DM now. Look at me. I'm the DM now. I've never even seen that movie. I have to actually watch that movie sometime.
I it's hard to know without playing for a long period of time. I've only ever played for maybe like a month or two, like at a time. So like I'm wondering what I would feel like a year into playing and not DMing. Because it's a very different experience. Like I think yeah, still even amongst the two, I would still pick that, but I imagine I would miss DMing, but I would probably twist that into almost like what you did with Valorant and Ismiliath, where like you're almost kind of co-DMing on a different part of the world or in a different aspect of the game that isn't like in the forefront. Like I'm putting in all
DM's
the
pet.
legwork, yeah, for like coming up with lore and families and
Your
stuff and
backstory just gets super detailed.
yeah, like I think that's probably where I would go is my character would just have a much deeper involvement in like the world or the game, and that's how I would try and finagle my way back in there. Um, yeah, yeah, I think that's where I land.
I don't have a lot to add. I would go with the somebody else DMing because that's already the case.
Mhm.
But also, in my experience thus far, like in my
Mhm.
experience up to now, for as much as our conversations in these videos are about DMing, I think we skew in that direction. We've done some player focused stuff, and
Mhm.
it would probably be good to do more in the future. But my experience up till now is that I prefer being a player.
Well, then here
So
is the actual would you rather. Would you rather your first one of you being the DM, but the thing that bothers you the least no longer exists, or
the most.
yeah, the most, sorry. Um, or you find a game you really enjoy with a DM that you really enjoy, but eventually you are shooed into being the DM for that group and you can't turn back. Or I guess you
What's
could
the?
even rephrase the first one as you as a player, whatever bothers you the most is gone to make it equal.
I'd probably. Hmm. Huh. I think that I would go with. Would I? So would I? Would I always be DMing, or would they like do
Yes.
mini campaigns and one-offs? Okay, then no. I would go with being a player that has had my pet peeve removed.
Okay.
Which off the top of my head, I'm not even sure what that would be exactly. But
Yeah, I was trying to think of what my biggest one was.
I feel like we could just put some of yours on a wall and throw a dart at it. Just any
Yeah.
one of them going poof would be as good as the other.
Yeah, I do have a fair few that are pretty persistent, so.
I think everybody does, just
Mm.
whether or not have verbalized them, put them into
Yeah.
words.
Oh, I'm sure everyone in our group is very well aware that I don't lack the ability to verbalize my complaints.
Well, being an online game, you kind of have to put more of that energy out there to,
Mhm.
to keep the keep the balloon in the air.
You know, that's something we haven't touched on, and it could be a tangent for a whole other video because we are kind of past our little time frame. But there's probably some sort of like unspoken or underlying social benefit of playing in person, of people being able to like read people better or like kind of get like social cues and stuff. Like when they do something annoying, it's probably easier for them to realize that with people actually around them versus like on camera where a lot of that's removed. So there probably is some sort of like natural benefit to playing in person that you can't get online.
One thing's for sure, it's a lot harder to sexually harass other people in the group in an online game. Like my
Yeah.
my quest to be immortalized in a D&D horror story has really been stymied by the pandemic.
I mean, there was the episode that you play without your shirt, and that could be construed as such.
Yeah, but it was so like it wasn't very noticeable. You crop our windows so tight in those videos, like there wasn't even a nip slip or anything. It was I looked like the somebody that I used to know video. Like, it's just very tame.
Well, will it make you happy if I made some anonymous Reddit account and made some large ranting post about the player that sexually harassed me
Oh
with taking his
no,
shirt
no, it's
off?
got to be real. It's got to be real, or it doesn't count.
Maybe it is real. Maybe I'm suppressing all these deep emotions, James.
You finally just be able to vent this
Yeah.
thing that's been bugging you for all this time. Uh,
Oh.
I'll take that, but not anonymous. You have to make a video like this and post it to Reddit.
Oh Lord. Yeah, out of context, that won't be absolutely awful.
Well, no clever transition this time. Like and subscribe, everybody. Would you
Thank
rather
you.
like and subscribe or subscribe and like?
Or dislike and share.
Would it be worth the dislikes if the shares?
Likes and dislikes are the same thing at this point. It's been
Okay.
proven.
Okay, yeah, all right. It's all engagement,
Just
baby.
click any button beneath the video and you're good.
Yeah, just start clicking around down there, and when
Hand
the
the tablet to your
UI,
5-year-old.
couple things change color on the UI, you'll know you're done. And give us your answers to our
Or more
would you
would you
rather.
rathers, because those are fun.
Either one, yeah,
Mm,
or both.
yeah.
Put them down there, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.